Hola, hola, amigos, players, playerettes, dudettes, everybody in between. It is I, Morgan Wright, your host with the most of the show of the podcast Game of Crimes, here literally with my partner in crime,
Steve Murphy, but you know me as Murph.
Yeah, you also know him as Boyd Holbrook on the wildly successful
Woohoo, Narcos.
By the way, Boyd's coming out. I saw him. You told me about this before. I think a lot of people knew, but I just saw the preview for the next Indiana Jones movie, and guess whose shiny face is in there?
Oh yeah, they played an ad during the Super Bowl, and
Yep.
you can see Boyd standing right behind
Indiana Jones.
There you go,
Harrison Ford.
That's the man. I can't believe he's still doing that, but he is. Good for him.
Yeah, well, if you see him on 1923, the Yellowstone, prequel,
look a little rough.
He's not Indiana Jones anymore. He's more like Metamucil Jones.
Oh.
He's going really slow.
Yep, that's our boy Boyd. He's moving right on up.
That's right, man. You still got to work. Get him on. All right, guys. Hey. You're trying. I know you're trying. Hey, guys, just some quick housekeeping because that's what the script says. Quick, head on over to Apple, Spotify, hit those 5 stars. It really helps us a lot. Really, it does. And we'd like to announce, too, this will be something you will see us doing, and we will start probably in the following episode. We have a new hosting platform called Audio Boom. Mm-hmm. We're very excited to get started with them, and we've got some ads that Murph and I will actually be doing, reading them live into the show. So it's going to be an interesting new take, and we're going to have some fun.
Oh, our first advertiser, once you hear our ad, we're going to have some fun with that one.
Oh, yeah. We got a couple others, too. Some others are coming in. So, hey, guys, but yeah, seriously, help us with that. It really helps us out. Murph that can't afford to eat cat food, and he's got to pay for that pool and hot tub out back.
That's right. I got a 6-year-old out there right now.
Yeah, and I just need a fancy place to retire to. Not anything fancy. I mean, well, yeah, fancy. Just 50 acres. Long driveway, private jet. I'm just helicopter.
Hey, if you're asking for the moon, go for it.
Go for it. All right, but we can't get there unless you help us with those 5 stars. Also, head on over to our website, GameofCrimesPodcast.com. That's where we'll have some cool pictures. Our book list. We've got some guests coming up. One has got 3 books. He's written 3 novels. That'll be coming out here in a couple episodes. But just head on over there, GameofCrimesPodcast.com. Everything you need to know about the show is there. Also, follow us on that thing they call social media at Game of Crimes on Twitter, Game of Crimes Podcast on Facebook, and the Instagram. But we've been having a lot of fun on patreon.com/Game of Crimes. We just did a funny, you can't make this shit up. I mean, I tell you, the only time I laughed harder is in this next episode coming up with Kevin Black.
Kevin's funny.
His story, I'm not going to give it away. Just let's say there is a theme to a couple of his stories. You'll just have to listen to them at the very end. I have not laughed so hard on a podcast episode as we did there, but but we got a lot of good stuff coming up too, like that. We've got our case of the month. By the time this comes out, our case of the month will be coming out, and we decided to do a follow-up with our buddy Rob Zaharashevitz, or Zaharashevsky, or something. We call him Zach. Nobody can pronounce his name. Robbie Z. We did an update on the Victor Boot Brittany Griner case and the swap, and some of Rob's thoughts about that. So that will be our case of the month on Patreon for this month. We did his episode. You heard that on the free side, but if you want to hear what Rob says in the follow-up, hit us on over to patreon.com/Game of Crimes. Also, remember, folks, this is a show about crime. We talk about bad people doing bad things and bad people doing bad things to good people. We take the story seriously, but
we never take ourselves serious, and we don't want you to take us too seriously either. Or don't take yourself too seriously. Life's too short.
Take us seriously when we say go to Game of Crimes podcast or patreon.com/Game of Crimes and sign up and give us 5 stars. Take us serious about that. Everything else, just whatever you feel like. But
life is good.
Life is good. Hey, and if you know that we don't take ourselves too seriously, head on over to the Facebook fan page, Game of Crimes Fans, run by our favorite mafia queen, Sandy Salvato. Just answer a few questions. Just get close, guys. If you're deemed worthy, you will be allowed access into the inner sanctum, where we have lots of good stuff. In fact, I posted a real good, if you guys see, we do sophisticated humor here. We're not like fancy comedians, but we did a whole thing where our Murphs, we actually were talking about the Real Housewives of DA Narcos, and Connie came on, and Connie admitted she had been in bed with Pedro Pascal.
Yes, he did. I've got photographic evidence.
And then this Christmas, what did I find? Or for Valentine's Day, I found a picture of a candle that says "smells like Pedro Pascal," and Murph showed it to Connie. She says, "You got to get me that."
That was hilarious.
So do that.
You know, there's a lot of people out there that love Pedro so much, they'd love to have that candle.
Folks, it doesn't really smell like Pedro Pascal because you know how you know? No, how do you buy the candle? How do you know what he smells like?
That's right.
You take some marketing firm's word for it. There you go. Hey, now we've had a couple folks. They say they want us to bring back small town police blotter. We're going to do that with a little bit of a twist. But hey, Murph, I thought we would have fun and throw a couple things into it. But I think, let's just give folks a taste of what we were doing there. So I just have to ask you, do you know what time it is? Do you know what time it is? Let me ask you one more time. Do you know what time it is?
What time is it?
It is time for
Small Town Police
Blotter. There we go. Hey, we'll cue the music, all that good stuff.
I almost missed the cue.
Yeah, you almost missed the cue. Hey, I got a couple stories, and then I have something you remember on our Patreon episode on You Can't Make This Shit Up. I did like weird laws. So I've decided, hey, we're going to pick out states and locations and find some weird laws. And I got one from Wisconsin today, but starting, this one comes from Mariposa, California, population 1,526. Salute. The crimes. This was just in a recent police blotter there. Here's the bullet points of the crimes that happened. A trailer mysteriously appeared at the North Glen Mobile Home Park during the night.
Whoa.
Oh.
It was probably on one of those Chinese balloons.
Dropped right in the middle of it. I'd look to see who's hiding inside there. There was a suspicious suspect talking to himself in the 7700 block of Forest Drive. Of course, there.
Did he come out of the trailer?
Yeah, he probably came out of the trailer. How do you know he just didn't have earbuds in or something? Maybe he's talking to somebody on the phone. Hey, speaking of that, a strange man came out of a private bar in Greeley Hills saying the wolves were after him.
Oh, how much what was he drinking?
Probably meth was involved in that one. It's California, remember?
And what do we say?
Don't do meth, kids. A man in the 10,300 block of Usona Way needed help picking up his wife from the floor.
Whoa. I don't want to touch that.
Speaking of big things running loose, a red Angus was loose on Hornitos Road. That's a name, Hornitos Road. An inmate at the jail hit his head when he got out of bed and was transported to Fremont Hospital. Who cares? And a man complained that his girlfriend was crazy because she was talking to the TV.
Man, I talk to the TV every time the news is on.
When college football is on, I talk to the TV all the time, man.
Hey, somebody's got to get that interception and that fumble going.
That's right. Hey, now, Steve, this one, though, too. Follow up. This comes from Rhode Island. I included Rhode Island. Rhode Island is about as big as a postage stamp, compared to the rest of the United States. So I figure, hey, it qualifies. Small jail there, Steve. Guy had a 90-day sentence for disorderly conduct. So what does this brilliant rocket scientist do? He spends 88 days coming up with a scheme to escape from jail. Escapes from jail on the 89th day, made his escape, only to be caught a couple months later and sent back to prison for 1.5 years.
What a moron. Some of you criminals out there, you just need a new line of work.
All right. Now, Steve, get ready for Weird Law of the Week, set in a reverb tone. In Wisconsin, Section 97.18, parenthesis 4, renders it illegal for a restaurant to serve margarine as a butter substitute unless specifically requested. According to the law, the serving of colored oleomargarine or margarine at a public eating place as a substitute for table butter is prohibited unless it is ordered by the customer.
Wow.
You know what else is illegal, Steve? You'll like this next one.
What?
Section 97.18, parenthesis 5, prohibits servers from providing margarine to school children, prisoners, and hospital patients unless a doctor has ordered otherwise.
Jeez. Where is this? In Wisconsin?
Wisconsin. The serving of oleomargarine or margarine to students, patients, or inmates of any state institution as a substitute for table butter is prohibited, except that such substitution may be ordered by the institution's superintendent when necessary for the health of a specific patient or inmate if directed by the physician in charge of the patient or inmate. And Steve, if you violate this law, those commit first offenses risk being fined between $100 and $500 and in prison for up to 90 days. Hey, don't do what the other idiot did. Second offenses and beyond can be $500 to $1,000 and up to a year in jail.
Holy cow. What brought that on?
The butter wars and the margarine wars from 1967, I think, to 1980. There's a huge war going on. And Wisconsin said, this far but no farther. We're taking a stand.
That's it. Not this line. You go no further. That's crazy. Well, I mean, I know they're known for cheese, but I didn't know they were known for butter.
Well, it's all kind of, some of the same product. You just do a little bit more, you get cheese. You do it a different way, you get butter.
Hey, you know what? We're going to see some friends of ours from Wisconsin this coming week. I'll have to ask them about this. I'm sure they know all about it.
Ask them when they went to a restaurant if they violated the law by ordering margarine. Okay. Well, I just thought we'd throw that out there. You guys have a little fun. So that tees this up because this next guy, he should be from Wisconsin. He's kind of a cheesehead, but he's a funny guy. He's got an accent between him and Murph. I spent a lot of time editing this episode because I had no idea what they were saying half the time.
I had to get you a country translator.
No, and what you had to do is get me a translator. And I make a mistake right at the beginning of this. I introduce him as Kevin Jackson instead of Kevin Black because I had just been talking with one of the guys that I do some consulting and advisory work. One of the top sales guys' name is Kevin Jackson, and that's where it was from. Anyway,
everybody knows Kevin was Michael's brother.
That's right, man. When you see him, when you hear him talk, there's you can't tell the difference. Except he can't sing and he can't dance.
Can't dance.
Can't say. Hey, but Steve, you came across this guy because not only did you come across this guy, this isn't a guy you just met at a conference. This is a guy you actually used to work with.
It is. It's Kevin and I met when I came out of Columbia in 1994. My first post in the U.S. was Greensboro, North Carolina. Had no idea where it was. Turned out to be one of the most beautiful places I've ever lived. But we only had 5 agents to cover 26 counties, and we didn't have a task force. So you had to go out and make good connections with all the state and locals in the areas that you were responsible for covering. And that's how I first met Kevin. He was brand new into one of the agencies there. And it's just turned in, as is true with most law enforcement connections, it turns into a lifetime friendship. And so Kevin he's done very well for himself. I think he's a major now. He's twice he was the past president of North Carolina Narcotics Officers Association. He just got selected as the secretary or treasurer for the National Narcotics Association Coalition, which is the entire United States. So this boy, he's not he's funny. He will make you laugh. He will break your neck. He'll break your leg if you piss him off. He's a big boy.
And one of the stories will break your heart too when he talks about his shift part.
Oh, and that's what I love about it. So here you got, this is a true tough guy. We didn't get into too much to his deployments over in the sandbox. He was working as a contractor. We did mention it, but that's tough duty. And this is a tough guy. If you've ever met a tough guy, just wait till you hear this story. I had tears in my eyes when he was telling us about it.
Well, and he's got a unique start to life, too, that we want to talk about. And we'll talk about it in there, but we're going to save the rest of it for the episode because it's funny and it's heartbreaking. He lost a friend in the line of duty. Like I said, he saw his first officer involved shooting, how he responded to that, and a personal thing that he's going to tell you about. But Murph, there's only one way we're going to hear about it. And that's if I ask you, are you ready to play the biggest, baddest, most dangerous game of all, the game of crime?
And I'm going to warn you right now, get you some tissues out. And after you get those, get in, sit down, shut up, and hold on. Here we go with Kevin.
Gang, players out there, this is going to be a tough episode. If you can understand what both Murph and our next guests are saying, you're ahead of the game, man. We're going to need an interpreter for you boys from the South. Welcome to the podcast, Kevin Jackson.
Kevin Black.
Oh, what did I say? Kevin Jackson? Jesus.
That's my cousin.
Now who's having a hard time here?
Oh, my. Look, it has been a long night and a long day. Murph and I got done recording. You guys don't know when we're doing this, but we went till like 8 or 8:30 last night. I got up early this morning doing a bunch of stuff. Kevin was supposed to record with us last week while he was down in D.C., but we had some technical issues because he was at a hotel. So we're doing it. So yeah, like I'm tired. Where did I come up with Jackson?
Well, it can only go uphill from here, right?
Are you going to moonwalk for us, Kevin?
I mean, I can try if you want to see it.
Well, or you could have just said Alan Jackson, then you could sing for us.
Way down yonder on the Chattahoochee, it gets hotter than a hoochie coochie. All right.
Oh, Lord, here we go.
Hey, well, let's get this thing started, Kevin, because the reason we're here is, Murph, just set the stage real quick. How did you come across Kevin? Because you've known him for longer than a couple minutes.
Yeah, we have. When I transferred with DEA out of Columbia back to the United States, I was stationed in Greensboro, North Carolina. And I'll be honest with you, I had no idea where Greensboro was. I had to go look it up on a map. Turns out to be one of the best places you can live. It was beautiful. North Carolina's a great state. And we only had 5 agents to cover the whole middle district of North Carolina, which was, I think it was 26 counties. So obviously you can't do a whole lot like that. And you've got to partner up with your state and local partners. And that was the cool thing. My partner at DEA at the time was Charlie Graham. You remember Charlie, Kevin? And Charlie made me some introductions to the state and local partners. And then eventually I got assigned to the counties south of Greensboro, which included Rowan, the Concord, Kannapolis area, Salisbury, particularly Davison County, which is where Lexington is. And somewhere along the line here, Kevin and I ran across each other, got to be friends back then. It's as is typical with the law enforcement culture. Once you make that friendship, it's a lifelong friendship. It doesn't matter that you retire. It doesn't matter that you move. I left Greensboro in 1998, went to Atlanta, and here we are in 2023, and Kevin and I are still talking to each other regularly. So
I think I got the name wrong because you got old, Murph, and you told me his name was Kevin Jackson. I think that's what it was.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Well, hey, Kevin, man, welcome to the show. As we do with all of our guests, it's our Cosa Nostra segment, Thing of Ours. How did you get started in this thing of ours? I mean, were you drunk one night outside a bar and somebody tossed you on the front, steps of a police station? How did this happen?
Now, that's very possible. I know Kevin.
Yeah, I've never met a beer I didn't like. I guess, it's kind of twofold. And I'm gonna regret part of this because of you, Morgan. But so the first part would have been my father that adopted me and raised me. He was born during the Great Depression, so I had a pretty stern upbringing, but I had a loving family. And my dad was constantly watching, John Wayne, Army movies, stuff like that. And so it kind of piqued my interest at an early age. And he also told me after one of my high school jobs that I wasn't cut out for manual labor. And the second part, and I'm going to regret saying this, is my neighbor was a state trooper.
What? What do you mean you're going to regret saying this?
Oh, no.
Here we go.
Another law enforcement professional inspired by a state trooper, Murph.
Absolutely. He would actually, we went to church with him and his family, and Wayne actually would, he would pick me up sometimes and take me, let me ride with him. And that kind of piqued my interest. And like I said, my father telling me I wasn't cut out for manual labor, I figured I better do something.
What? And
yeah, we got to hear that story.
Yeah, okay, rewind. You don't get to go past that. What were the conditions in your youth that said you weren't cut out for manual labor?
Well, in between football and track season one year, I took a job in High Point, North Carolina, at a textile factory that made like women's shoulder pads and stuff like that. And I guess it would have been my senior year in high school. And I was, one of the guys that packed the bags full of women's shoulder pads or bra pads or whatever it was that was on the machine that day. And I'd got mad earlier in the day because Christmas was coming up, and our foreman told us, he said, we get Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, then you're expected to work. He said, I know you high school guys are out of school for like 2 weeks. And he said, y'all are kind of expected to be here. And I'm like, this is my senior year in high school. I'm going in the military when I graduate. I don't have time for this shit. So I was kind of butthurt about that. And I'm on the line, I'm packing shoulder pads, and there was this little machine that would come down and tie the shoulder pads to compress them so you could put them in a bag. And it caught me in the top of the hand. It pinned my hand down. So as I'm pulling this arm, I guess is what it was, off from me, the foreman comes by and says, you need to quit dragging ass and get these shoulder pads packed. And I sat there for a minute and I'm like, well, this is bullshit. So I walked by and I'm like, peace out. I hit the door and I went home. My dad looked at his watch when I came in and he said, why are you not at work? And so I told my dad the story. And he sat there and shook his head, and he just looked at me and he said, son, I'm going to give you a piece of advice and you need to follow it. And I said, what's that, Dad? And he said, you need to go to college and get an education because you're not cut out for manual labor. And that's all he said. And he went back to watching television. I went down to my room and I'm like, I guess he's right.
Well, hey, let's explore just a little bit, though. Murph, you were getting ready to say something. Go ahead.
How old were you when you were adopted, Kevin?
So I was adopted I was 5 months old.
Oh, wow.
And as I like to tell my adoptive mother and now my biological mother, it was pretty rough. It was pretty rough growing up with the nuns. I mean, they'd make you get up early and sweep and mop and, things like that. So it was kind of rough living those first few months.
Those 5 months, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you're teaching a 5-month-old to hold a mop. That's pretty tough.
I mean, it was pretty impressive, but it was hard work.
Well, you mentioned something interesting. You said your adoptive mom and biological mom. Does that also include your adoptive father and biological father?
It absolutely does. My adoptive father's passed away. He was, like I said, he was born during the Great Depression. He was a Korean War era veteran. So Dad passed away probably about 23 years ago now.
And how did it come about that you met your biological parents?
Well, before you, real quick, Kevin, before you say how, let me go. Let's preface Murph's question with why. Why did you go looking for him, and then how did you find him?
So my mother, which being down south, I call her Mama, which would be because sometimes I tend to get the two confused, or people get confused with what I say. So my mama that raised me, she had told me, I guess I knew. I don't ever remember not knowing that I was adopted, to the point that they would get calls from school when I started elementary school and even preschool, where kids would, because to me it was normal. So I would talk about it, and other kids, kids being kids, I would get picked on, and I got in trouble numerous times because I could convince other kids that their parents didn't really want them, and mine chose me. So then they would cry, and I would get in trouble, and they would call my parents. But
now, and I guess just to interrupt you for a sec, Kevin, just remember that thought as we go through this interview, because you're going to see. You remember when I put in our notes, he's got a lot of funny stories. This is the beginning of it right here.
Oh, yes. So like I said, I never did not know that I was adopted, and my mom and I would talk about it a lot of times, and she always told me from a young age that she would support, if I ever wanted to try and find my biological parents, she would be 100% supportive. And I thought about it on and off through the years. And I mean, I had a great childhood growing up. I wouldn't change any of it for anything.
Hey, Kevin, I know you kind of alluded to it, but do you recall going back? When was the first time you remember not just that you were adopted, but you understood what adopted mean? I mean, were you like in second grade, third grade? How early are we talking about?
I don't know that I don't ever recall not having an understanding of what it meant. Like I said, my mother and father that raised me, I just really I don't have any recollection of not knowing what adoption was. I was constantly, told that I was, special. They tried to have kids, they couldn't. They really, like I said, I don't ever remember not knowing.
So then you're fast forwarding now. You were talking about, so they always supported you and said if you ever wanted to go look. So you thought about it for years. What was the trigger that finally said, "Hey, I want to do this"?
So my dad died. He had some health issues, and it kind of sparked my interest then. And I set it off on the back burner. Didn't really think a lot about it. And my wife at the time, I was probably about 44 years old. And we talked about it at length, and she bought me a Ancestry DNA kit for Christmas. And me being the typical male, I didn't read the directions. I just, went in, tore the box apart and did it. And I think the first one came back that I was part cheeseburger and something else, because you're not supposed to eat before you take them. So they send me another one in the mail, and I took it. And I actually read.
Wait a minute! Did you follow the directions?
I followed the directions that time, and I took it, and it came back, and it allowed me to set up a profile, and of course I made it public. So that would have been, I guess, December, January time frame. So fast forward to July, she was in
Who's she?
My wife. She was in FBI leader school at the time down in, I think it was Tampa, Florida, or female leadership course or something. But I'd periodically checked over the few months to see if anything would link, and I never really got anything. And I came home that day, and I was going to let the dogs out, and I was going to was going to jiu-jitsu class that evening. I thought, while the dogs are out, I'm just going to check it real quick and see what's on here. So I had a link with a person named Larry Haynes, and it showed Larry and I as being first cousins. But Larry's age, he was roughly, I think Larry was 68, 69 at the time. And he had sent me a message, and it said, Ancestry DNA is showing us to be first cousins. Do you have any idea how we're related? And I told Larry at that time, I said, I don't. I said, I was adopted in 1974. And that was part of the reason that I'm on here is to, see if I can find somebody that I'm, related to, and then kind of track things back. And so, we just kind of chatted back and forth, exchanged phone numbers. So I immediately, like I guess everybody does today, I went to Facebook, and of course I find Larry, and I see a blonde-headed girl. The younger blonde-headed girl is one of his Facebook friends. Her middle name was Haynes, but she had a different last name because obviously she's married. And I remember thinking to myself, I said, she looks like me, or I look like her. So I called my mother on the phone, and I said, you're not going to believe this shit. I said, you need to, well, I didn't say shit to mama, but I said, you're not going to believe this. I said, you need to go on Facebook and look at this. So I've got her on speakerphone. She's beating around on the computer, and she's like, yeah, I can definitely see the resemblance. She's like, what do you think? I said, I don't really have anything to go on now. I'm just kind of in the, the infancy of the whole thing. So the following day, like I said, Larry and I had texted back and forth. Of course, I'd done my due diligence to make sure he wasn't a criminal or anything. And we'd actually just got done doing a heroin deal in the parking lot of Walmart, which is, the popular spot to sell dope in the South. And I'd gone back to my office
next to a
yes,
Waffle House.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely. So I go back to my office, and it's patrol shift change. And so, you got people milling up and down the hallways at the agency, and, people are stopping in to BS and whatnot. So I had an office full of people. And my Uncle Larry, or what I later found to be my Uncle Larry, sends me a text message, and he said, what's your date of birth? And I'm like, I'm not giving you my date of birth. That's how, some Chinese person ends up being named Kevin Black. I'm not going to do that.
He's probably got $17 million he wanted to give you.
Yeah.
I just told him, I said, March 74 is all I said. And he immediately responds back with my date of birth, the day. And so that was kind of weird. So I called him. And like I said, there's people in the...
Now, Kevin, hold on here for a second. You're a cop at this time, right?
Yes.
And I know you said you didn't want to give him all of your information because you didn't want some Chinese guy to be named Kevin Black. But were any red flags going off at this time? Did you think that this was because you're working dope, you're working cases? Did anything trigger at this time with a red flag, thinking, hey, this is an operation to target me or screw with me, or did you really believe that this is what was going on because of the pictures and everything? All I'm trying to say is that sometimes there's, against all common sense, you think, oh no, this can't be right. And then that's how some of these big scams happen. So were there any huge flags going off, or is this more just kind of a nagging thing? The only reason,
and I probably put too much faith in corporate America, but the only reason that I didn't think that it was a scam was because of the DNA link through Ancestry. I thought, in my opinion, it's a reputable site. There's probably, I've never heard of anything, any scams coming out of Ancestry. So I was like, I'm gonna give it the benefit of the doubt because this is the closest that I've ever been. One of my best friends I actually grew up with, his dad was our high school football coach. That summer, he had sent me a picture of a guy that he saw at Myrtle Beach, and he's like, this has got to be your dad. He looks just like you. He's built like you. And he had it's no wonder he didn't go to jail because he was stalking the guy around the beach, taking pictures of him so he could send to me. And there was some resemblance. I mean, he obviously wasn't as good looking, but there was some resemblance.
Couldn't be.
Yeah. Well, apparently you didn't inherit the modesty gene, so
I took it off a while back.
You can deactivate that one.
Yeah. So continue on. So you've got this going. He comes back because that's got to be a weird feeling. Like he knows your date of birth, and it's like, okay.
Yeah. He knows my date of birth, and that's when I had just a weird feeling in the pit of my stomach. So I got out, went down the hall, went into a private office where one of the APHIS machines is at, so I could have a little bit of privacy.
Okay, and we have a rule here. You can't, because you used FBI, LEDA, and then we talked about APHIS, so you got to define acronyms. So let's go real quick back to the training your wife went to. What was that?
I'm not sure what the acronym is because it's the FBI, and I try to avoid them at all costs. But it's a leadership development course.
Okay,
and I think this one specifically, if I remember correctly, was geared toward
women
in law enforcement management that she was taking.
And then tell people what APHIS is.
Oh, it's some magic acronym that has something to do with fingerprints. I'm just a dumb detective. That's out of my wheelhouse.
Yeah, automated fingerprint identification system.
I'll take your word for it.
I'll help you with the acronyms, okay? You just let it do the magic in the background. So you go into the APHIS office, you're playing with fingerprints, and then what happens next?
So I call Larry on the phone, and I said, "How did you know my date of birth?" And he got real quiet, and his voice cracked, and he said, "I'm not your first cousin. I'm your uncle." So when he says that, immediately I'm thinking, okay, well, it's got to be on my mother or father's side because there's no other option there. And I said, really? And he said, yes. He said, your dad is my brother. And I said, wow, is he still alive? And he said, yes, he's still alive. And he said, I'm standing here in the living room with your dad and your mother now. So that was like a punch in the gut. I got kind of quiet because I was, just taking it all in. And I said, are you sure? I said, you better not be fucking with me. And he's like, no. He said, I'm being serious. And I said, well, where are you at? Can I come over? And he said, well, we were hoping that's what you would say. And he said, yes. He said, I'm going to give you the address. So I come in.
How far away was it from where you were at?
So it's actually in the county that I work in. So it was maybe 25 minutes away.
Wait a minute. All of these years, your mother and father lived in the same county as you?
No, they lived the next county over. I live in Davidson County and work in Rowan. Yeah.
But how many people in those counties?
Oh, I think both of them are probably 150,000 plus in each county.
All right. But you're within an hour's drive of your mom and dad, right? Your biological mom and dad. All of these years.
All these years.
Were you with Rowan or Davidson County at that time?
Rowan. Yeah. And growing up, I didn't know where Salisbury was because I grew up in Thomasville. So we went to High Point, Winston, or Greensboro, never really anywhere, really south there. I'd been to Charlotte, growing up for stuff, but it just wasn't somewhere I would have been. You
get the call, you decide, do you take the drive?
So I get the call, and Steve will remember this or remember him. So Sam Gregory was in the office with me. He retired from the SBI and came to work for us at the sheriff's office. And Sam kind of knew, about the whole thing of Larry contacting me. And I looked at Sam. I said, I got to go. I'll talk to you later. And he could tell something was wrong. So I leave. And the first person I called I called my wife, and I said, you're not going to believe this. Ancestry's hit, which I told her the night before about the link. And I told her what had happened. And she's over the moon, excited. I hang up the phone with her. I call my mother, and I tell her, and it kind of bothered me because Mom had been excited up to that point. And then when reality sets in, she was just kind of, didn't really have a lot to say. And I said, well, do you want to go with me? And she said, no, I think this is something you probably need to do on your own first. So I called my daughter next, and I told her, and she asked her if she wanted to go. And she's like, no, Dad, I'm kind of like, they call my mother Nene. She said, I'm kind of like Nene. I think it's something you need to do first.
Do you think your mama, real quick, what do you think she was scared of at that point, that she's raised you all these years and that you might turn your affection or attention to the other set of parents?
Oh, that was absolutely it. Because she later told me that she just wasn't ready to share me with anyone. And I'm 44 years old at that time. And so I called my son next, and I told him, and he's got he's a smart ass like I am. And he said, well, give me the address that you're going to be at. And I said, well, are you coming over? And he said, no, I'm not coming over. He said, but if this is a scam or something and they kidnap you, we'll know where to start looking. So
Smart kid.
well, yeah, I guess he really is.
Not a smart kid, but a smart ass kid. I mean, that's like one of the most eventful moments in your life. And your guy, he's like, oh, if you get kidnapped, we know where to start.
Yeah, that's what he said. He said, if they kidnap you or something, we'll know where to start looking for you. So
I like it.
So I go home, and in the meantime, Larry calls me back, and I told him, I said, I've got to let the dogs out, switch cars, and I'll come down. So I drive over, and of course, I haven't met Larry yet. I just saw him through Facebook, but I recognize him standing in the driveway, and there's a dark-haired lady with him who I found out later was my aunt. It was his wife. And as soon as he sees me, he runs up and grabs me and hugs me. And as soon as he lets go, Aunt Lynn does the same thing. Well, I see two people in the doorway of the house that I'm at. Look, I see a blonde-headed lady looking out the window or looking out the door. And as we walk in, I immediately, it's hard to describe. That was actually my mother. And there was an immediate connection there that I can't really explain. But I knew who she was. And, of course she grabs me and hugs me. And then I see my father. And, if you ever see a picture of us, I mean, there's absolutely no denying it whatsoever. And, we just all kind of stood there and cried for a minute. And, we sat down on the couch and my mother says they got a computer there and they've got some of my pictures on Facebook pulled up. And I said, what's this? And she said, well, your aunt and uncle, they came over here and showed us these pictures after Larry had connected with you through Ancestry. And so they were looking at pictures of me and of course I look like my brother and sister and obviously my father. So we kind of sat down, the emotions kind of settled a little bit. And the first question I had for them was, do I have any siblings? Because I had assumed at this point, there would have been, more likely than not, they were not together. There would be half brothers, half sisters. So I was kind of, ready for all that. And they said, yes, you have a brother and sister both. And I said, I have a brother and sister both with you two? And they're like, yeah. So then they go into the story about what happened. And
so, Kevin, how long had you been in law enforcement at this time?
Oh, God, let's see. That was 4 years ago. About 23, 24 years.
And you've been through a lot of stuff. You've seen a lot of stuff. We're going to talk about some of these stories, but you've been involved in a lot of, dangerous situations, a lot of stuff like that, right?
Yes, sir.
How prepared were you for this situation?
None whatsoever. I couldn't have been prepared for this. Nothing. I mean, I was a complete mess, emotionally. And I was trying to be strong because they were obviously just, extremely, extremely upset. And when, you hear the rest of it, you'll kind of understand why. But there was nothing that could have prepared me for it. All these years of knowing and it not really being a big deal to me. When I come face to face with my parents after 44 years, it was just, I can't describe the emotion.
So I tell you what, I got a lump in my throat just listening to you here.
Well, it's compelling. Look, we just got through doing an interview with somebody Steve met, Regina Patterson King from DEA, and to hear her story growing up. I mean, some of these stories we're hearing now about if people knew what you went through, just amazing. But obviously in the back of your head, I mean, now you know the what, do I have a brother and sister? Then now you're kind of getting into the why. So why did they put you up for adoption?
So a quick segue on finding them. In North Carolina, I don't know how it is in other states, when the adoption is done through social services, those records are sealed. They recently passed a law a few years back where you can file a motion and they'll release any medical history that they have, but everything else is sealed in vital records down in Raleigh. So, had a real good friend of mine. He just recently retired back in December. His name was Mark Class, and Mark was a Superior Court judge, lifelong friend of mine. And I'd spoken to him about seeing if I could get a Superior Court judge's order to unseal those records. And he was actually researching what needed to be done when that whole ancestry thing hit. So anyway, my mother did most of the talking. My dad was, he's a big hearted guy and was just very, very emotional. So my mother was an orphan. She was in and out of orphanages in Lexington as a child. So I guess at that time of the world, they 1974, once the orphans got a certain age, they moved them from Davidson County to Rowan County, and there was a working farm there. So I think it's Nazareth's Home for Children, some shit like that's the name of it. But anyway, so she was actually living on that farm and going to East Rowan High School when she met my father. So she was, I think, let me get the ages right. I think she was 16. He was 18 at the time. She gets pregnant with me. The two of them are not together. She was terrified that, number one, she couldn't raise a child at 16 years old. I mean, she had no family support system. She's living in an orphanage. And my father, he was, like I said, the two of them were not together. So she was afraid that if she did give birth to me, that they were going to immediately take me and put me in the system. Excuse me. So she decided immediately to put me up for adoption. So she puts me up for adoption, and she told me, she said, I got to be with you for 30 minutes before they came and took you away from me. And she said, and obviously I didn't see you again until 44 years later. And she thought that I immediately went into an adoptive home. And then, of course, I had to tell her, I'd spent time with the nuns for 5 months before I went to my parents. But fast forward 2 years later, her and my father get back together. They get married. They have my brother and my sister, and they've been together ever since.
Did they know about you before the contact through Ancestry? In other words, had they found you through social media or anything else and, watching you, or did they only discover your existence because of the Ancestry.com?
They had no idea. My parents had tried to find me, and they ran into the same stone walls that I did. And that was, nothing would be released. Everything was sealed. So my brother and sister didn't know about me at all. My parents said that they had prayed over it time and time again, but they didn't know what to tell them because they knew they would have 1,000 questions, and they didn't have any answers. So they just kind of kept it a family secret, and just hoping one day that we'd be able to reconnect.
So from that day that you met your biological parents till you met your brother and sister, how much time elapsed there?
So I met my parents on Tuesday. My brother was out of town. He works for the railroad. I can't remember if it was for work or something with his church, but he was out of town. And they wanted to wait and tell my brother and sister at the same time. And they wanted me to be there. And I told them that personally, I didn't, that was something that they needed to hear from you guys. And then, because they're going to have questions that they probably wouldn't ask with me there. I don't want to make shit any more uncomfortable, than it already is. Work through that with them. And then, we can kind of go from there. Because of course, my parents and I had already agreed we were going to have a relationship regardless of what anybody else thought.
Yeah, because I can see what you mean. That would have caused, having you in the room would have been too many complications. So, and now, did your brother and sister both live same county? Still within an hour of you this whole time?
Absolutely, whole time.
Wow.
And that area down there, quite honestly, Davidson and Rowan counties aren't huge counties. You're in North Carolina. It's amazing that you guys didn't cross each other somewhere in all those years and just look at each other like, holy cow, we look alike.
Yeah, it is.
Sorry, I'm laughing because we're on video and Kevin's dog he's getting jealous. He's kissing daddy. He wants some loving, some attention.
Moxie wants an interview.
Hey,
I'm sorry,
go ahead, Steve.
Kevin has told me this story before, and it's a tearjerker. And to hear it again, and maybe because, Kevin knows my daughters are both adopted, and we kind of went through this with the oldest one. The youngest one has no desire to meet her birth mom, but our oldest one did, and they're both from Colombia in South America. But we did the same thing, Kevin. We never held back that they were adopted. They knew it from the time they were babies, and we went through the thing about you're special because, God introduced us to you. And you kind of have a selection process, and there's the first kids we looked at, and that's the ones we took. But we finally did. Monica, we took her down during the first season of filming of Narcos. She went to Colombia with us and actually got to meet her birth mother, 3 sisters, a niece, and a nephew.
Well, Steve, I got to tell you, though, being a trained criminal investigator, I think your daughters would have figured out kind of at an early age that they didn't look like you.
Oh, yeah. We went to, how come my skin's so dark? Am I a black person? And how'd that happen?
You just tan better than Daddy and Mommy. Daddy can't go out in the sun.
Yeah, it's funny.
Hey, Kevin, but back to that. So, because we're going to go back and start again with, how'd you get involved in this thing? But in all your years, like you said, you weren't prepared for this. So what's your process of processing it, right? How did you go about dealing with it? How did you go about, talking to them? You probably got to have 1,000 questions and stuff, but what were the most important questions to you? I think you got one of them answered, which is why, you understood how it happened, right? What were some of the other important things for you that you needed to get answered?
Well, we kind of segued into, because I was in my mid 40s, with some medical questions that I wanted to know if there was something obviously that I would need to look at, and I found out there was a couple of tests I probably needed to have done that I should have done at 40, not at 44. So I took care of those, and everything was good. And then we just it turned into back and forth questions of tell me about your life, tell me about growing up, tell me about the parents that that adopted you. What kind of childhood did you have? And I forgot this part of it. As soon as we met and they started hugging me and crying, both of them immediately began apologizing. We're sorry. Please forgive us. We're so sorry. And I said, listen, let's stop now. I said, I understand what you did. I'm glad you did it. I had a great childhood growing up. I wouldn't change it for the world. Even meeting you guys today, I wouldn't change anything that's happened up to this point in my life, because if I change that, what else changes? But I said, you don't have anything to feel any guilt or regret about. And I think I think I could tell by the look on their face that I think that kind of helped, relieve them of the guilt that they'd had for, 44 years.
Well, that's got to be tough living with it for that many years. And the other tough part's got to be is them living with the secret with a son and daughter and not telling them. Because I got to imagine the son and daughter at some point they're going to have questions, but maybe do they feel, as you find out later, what are their feelings? Do they feel hurt that the secret was kept from them? How do they handle it?
And my brother will probably listen to this and be mad, but I think my sister thought it was great. And my brother and I get along, we get along wonderfully, but I think initially, and just, being a man, I think, he was always, in his mind, the firstborn, the oldest. And then, here I come along. And I think it kind of bothered him at first. I know for some reason his wife had an issue with not being included in them, telling my brother and sister that we were, that they had an older brother. I still to this day, not real sure why the hell that, happened, why she got upset about that. But, it's people make their own decisions, and not for me to wonder or worry about.
So, man, it's kind of hard because you go, okay, where do we go with this? But let's kind of put a pin in that, because we'll get into that later as we get through your career and get up to this point. But how long did it take you from, like you said, the minute you met him till like all the notifications, everybody who's going to know knows? How long of a process does this play out?
So they tell my brother and sister on that Friday afternoon. My sister immediately contacted me and we talked. Because I was just I was actually sitting on my front porch, drinking bourbon, smoking a cigar around the time that I knew that they were going to tell them, just to, kind of calm my nerves, because I had no idea, what their feelings were going to be. And then my mother had reached out over the next few days and told some of our, close family. I didn't have any brothers and sisters growing up. I was the only child. So she had told some of the close family members, and it was probably about a week later that I decided, because I wanted to share it. I'm proud that I found them, and they are good people, because I'd already made up my mind if they were, if they were not decent people, I could walk away and not have any regrets at all, because, like I said, I had a wonderful childhood. So I put it on Facebook, and then it kind of spiraled out of control. And Murph, I don't know if you remember, Karen Myers. It was with Fox 8 News in Greensboro. Karen was
I don't.
She was a newscaster for years, and she was a friend of mine, and she picked it up, and they immediately wanted to do a news story on it.
Really?
Oh yeah, yeah. So I talked to my parents about it, and we discussed it at length, and my mother, kind of what they wanted to do, and we all kind of agreed. It's maybe if somebody else is wanting to do the same thing, maybe this gives them the little extra push they need, or the encouragement. So we decided to do that, and of course they aired it on the news several times, and then I just got flooded with calls and emails and Facebook messages, and it was. I mean, I'm truly blessed. If I died today, I've lived a good wholesome, or well, not wholesome, but a good full life.
We're going to talk about that Freudian slip right there. Wholesome. Well, maybe not wholesome, but okay. Thank you for providing the context we need to kind of. So let's save that, because that's such a great story. I mean, we're going to incorporate it as we go along. So now let's rewind a little bit back to, again, Cosa Nostra, thing of ours. So, Dad, Korean War vet. You remember which branch?
Dad was in 82nd Airborne.
Oh, awesome. My dad was a World War II and a Vietnam vet. He got out before Korea, came back in afterwards, but salute him. But so kind of go back to your motivations so your dad gave you that piece of advice. You're graduating high school, no more messing with women's bras. I mean, I can see where that's going to lead you down a path of sinful actions later.
I don't know that ever stopped.
No.
Yeah, why would you say So what decision did you make? You talked about going into the military. What did you do? Did you go to college or go to the military?
Well, so ended up over my life, I did both. So my father was actually it was High Point College at the time. It's High Point University. And I think Dad started in 48, 49 maybe. And at some point during his college career, he didn't enroll for the next upcoming academic year, because he was going to stay home and help my grandmother on the farm that she had, and that's when he was drafted. So my parents, as long as I can remember, it was, you're going to college, you're going to college, you're going to college, and I pretty well. I mean, I always tell everybody those 4 years of high school was a blast. I would do it again tomorrow, but it had jack shit to do with education. I mean, it was football, sports, chasing women, and drinking beer, and just living, just having the best time ever, which is pretty dumb on my part. But so come my senior year in high school, there was a couple colleges, little small colleges that had a little bit of interest in me, and probably would have had more of an interest if my grades would have been better, to play football. And then I decided for
what position did you play in football?
I played defensive end, defensive tackle, and tight end, but I couldn't catch a cold as a tight end. I mean, you could hit me in the hands and it's not going anywhere. I could block if that's what you need me to do, but if you handed it to me, I was fine. But if you threw it at me, I mean, yeah, it was a disaster.
Oh, so a career in explosives and ordnance demolition wasn't in your future either.
Well, actually, I am an explosive breacher now, so I mean.
Well, we'll have to talk about. Okay,
and I've got all 10 fingers still. So
still got all 10. Okay.
Today you have.
Today I have. Right. What's the old saying? If you see me running, you better be following me.
You better catch up and get going.
So what'd you do?
So I decided that. I hope I don't get in trouble for it. I decided that it was a good idea to get my high school girlfriend pregnant in the fall of my senior year. And I graduated in.
Oh no, hold on, pal. I don't think there was a lot of thinking behind that.
That's more like a oops.
Well, yeah. In the words of my father, he said he set me down one day, and I don't even know what sparked the conversation, but he looked at me because he was always pretty stoic. Hold on one second, I'll stop that. He had to go in there and aggravate her brother. My dad told me, he said, son, he said, you've got a problem. He said, you have several, but the main one that I see is your dad. Is you're just damn girl crazy. And I'm like, well, Dad, I mean, I'm a teenage boy. What am I? He's like, it goes way past that. He's like, it's just, he said, you got a damn problem. So when he found out she was pregnant, Dad didn't have a lot to say. He was, I mean, you could tell he was very upset. And my grandmother, and Steve will get this being from the South. My grandmother lived next door. We had about, I don't know, 4 acres right in there together. And so I was constantly back and forth with her as a kid. And she lived to be 95 years old. Never was sick, just woke up one day, didn't feel good, and then died 2 days later. But when I told my grandmother in 1992, she'd been 92 years old, she was born in 1900. I told my grandmother that I'd gotten my girlfriend pregnant. And my grandmother leaned back and she said, well, I don't know what she expected. She runs around with those little short shorts on all the time. What did she think was going to happen?
That's because her grandson can do no wrong. It's the girl's fault. That's taking up your family.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
So my best friend from high school, his dad was our football coach. We end up going. We joined the Marine Corps together, and I had a recruiter at the time. I was allergic to bees. I would have an anaphylactic reaction, if I was stung. So he told me immediately off the bat, he's like, do not disclose any of this ever to anybody until after you get in. He said, because initially they're not going to, at that time, I think now that's since changed. I was in the military total probably just shy of 20 years. I had 15 years in. But so Travis and I go to, we joined the Marine Corps together. Well, my son's mother's parents and my parents at the time were like, just go to college. We'll take care of everything here. Get an education, go ahead and get your life started. And then, get a job and support your family. But in the meantime, we're going to help you. Both family units are willing to help. And I wanted absolutely no part of that whatsoever. I wanted to see the world. I wanted to rip, roar, and raise hell. And, I love my son, love him to death. Wouldn't change it for the world, but I was just not ready for any of that shit. So segue. So my friend and I ran a landscaping business that summer before we left for boot camp. And, a lady had a huge brush pile she wanted moved. And, we wanted to go fishing that afternoon. So we got tired of trying to haul everything off. So we decided we'd pour a bunch of gasoline on it, strike a match and let it burn. And then we could go fishing. Well, it was humid like it is in the South. And, so that, now know a little bit more about explosives. The fumes kind of lay low due to the humidity. And we had part of the brush pile was smoldering because some of the wood was wet, but it wouldn't catch. And Travis grabs a 5-gallon gas can, climbs up in the brush pile, and is pouring gas everywhere. At the moment it caught. And I seen him, he took off across the yard like a raped ape. I ain't never seen anybody run that fast. And when he comes back, you could see skin on his chest because he didn't have a shirt on. And when he got closer, because I'm laughing my ass off because I thought it scared him. Because when the explosion went off, it rattled the windows in the house, the older lady's house. And when he got closer, I noticed he didn't have any eyebrows or a mustache, that it had singed it off.
Oh, jeez.
So anyway, he ends up in the burn unit at Baptist Hospital for about 9 days. And it's kind of the same thing. The recruiter's like, you guys can't mention any of this shit to anybody. Once you get in, you're fine. Keep it to yourself, blah, blah, blah. So
see, recruiters, them damn recruiters, all they care about is making their numbers.
Absolutely.
They're like used car salesmen, man. They'll tell you whatever they got to close the deal.
So we get to Parris Island, South Carolina. We get picked up, and they give us Been 1992, and
So you're just coming in after the Gulf War.
just after the Gulf War, yes. And so we get there, and they're reading us the riot act. If there's something you haven't told, you better tell it now. No, look, hindsight's 2020. 48 years old. That's all bullshit. They're just trying to get you to tell something. But at 18,
Yeah.
You're scared
I was
shitless.
scared shitless. And I remember what the recruiter said. He said, once you get in, you're fine. So Travis tells me, he's like, I'm going to tell him about being burned. And he said, I don't want to get in trouble. And I'm like, I'll tell him about the bee stings because, our recruiter said once we get here, we're fine. So, we're up front and honest. We tell everything, we're going through, and it's probably, I don't know, about a month in the boot camp. And after PT formation that morning, they called me up and told me I had to go to base medical. So I go down to base medical. They didn't tell me why. So I go down to base medical, and they had me sitting out in front of a room, and they bring me in, and there's a bunch of Navy medical personnel in there. And now I know it's complete 110% bullshit, but there was a stack of files in front of one officer, and he put his hand on it, and he said, when did you find out you were allergic to bees? And we know everything because it's in this file right here, which now I know was, just horseshit because there's no way he could have got it. So I was honest with him, and he said, well, why didn't you disclose it up front? And I said, well, the recruiter told me, told him everything the recruiter said. So they send me back to my platoon, and about a day or so later, they tell me that I'm being discharged. So I request mass with the company CO, go down and talk to him, and he's, really cool guy. I'll never forget. It was Captain Clancy was his name, and he said it's 1992. He said Bill Clinton's the president. They're doing a reduction in force, and any reason they can find to put somebody out, they're going to get rid of you. And I said, well, I don't want to leave this. This is what I want to do. And he said, the best advice I can give you is to go home. If you got a friend that's a doctor, get him to write some letters for you, and you can more likely not get back in. So that's what I ended up doing. I come back home. As I refer to it, I started going to college the first time. Went and saw a doctor, had him run some tests. Obviously, it was still, there was still allergic, very highly allergic to bees. Talked to the Marine Corps. They considered me prior service, even though, I hadn't finished boot camp. Then pops in the Army recruiter, and actually Army National Guard recruiter. And he's like, we'll take you. And I said, well, what do we need to do? And he said, so he looks over the letter that the doctor wrote, and I'm pretty sure the statute of limitations are over, but he said, meet me back here at 7:00 tonight. And he said, we'll take care of this.
Your first op.
My first op. So about 7:00 that night, I go to the recruiting office. And
now, did you have a balaclava on? Were you in camo, face paint, or what?
No, but there wasn't any lights on in the place except his office, and he had a 6-pack of beer on the desk. And this was before, you could scan something in a computer and, work on documents and stuff. And I gave him that letter, and the last paragraph said something along the lines of, it is my medical opinion that if he's re-stung, he will run a high risk of an anaphylactic reaction. He said, this paragraph is not good at all. He said, this is going to preclude you from going in. He said, I'll be back in a minute. So I heard him in the back room, and he's back there for, all you heard was the printer going, just kicking papers out. And then you'd hear him screw with something, then you'd hear it again. And then you'd hear him on a typewriter. And he came back, and the paragraph said, in my medical opinion, I think he is, fit for military service.
Fit for duty.
So he said, I'm going to tell you something right now. And he said, when you go to MEPS, he said, I don't care what they ask you. I don't care what they promise you. It's all bullshit. Do not tell them anything. I'm like, I didn't learn my lesson the first time. So I go to the Charlotte MEPS Center, and I'll never forget it. There was this old crusty doctor that I had the last doc I went in front of, and he takes my letter and he holds it up to the light, and he's looking at it, and he turns it sideways, and I'm like, oh shit. And then he looks at me and he said, do you want back in that bad? I said, what do you mean? And he said, either this doctor's a moron or somebody doctored this paperwork. He said, because I'm reading, the levels at which, your body reacts to insect stings. And he's like, either this guy don't know what the hell he's doing, or you got somebody else to write the letter. I'm like, this came straight from my doctor, sir. I said, that's the gospel. And he said, well, it's your life. And he stamped it, and out the door I went, and I never looked back.
So I'm going to throw another acronym at you because you said it. See if you remember this one, MEPS.
Military Entrance Processing Station.
There you go. Yeah. Well,
Yep,
when I went through 1979, I joined the reserves to get into ROTC, but I went through Fort Lost in the Woods, Missouri, June and July of 1979. You want to talk about humidity? You want to talk about it's the worst 8 weeks of my life. Anyway, but it was fun. Like you say, something you'll always do. But yeah, that was the fun part, going through the AFES, going through the initial processing, and then finally getting to Fort Lost in the Woods and getting all your stuff. But anyway, I digress. Back to you now. So you join, you're in the Guard. So what do you do? Where do you go?
Fort Sill, Oklahoma.
And what was your MOS, military occupation specialty?
My original MOS was artillery cannon crew member, cannon cocker. And
hence, Fort Sill's a good place to do that at.
Yep, good place to do it. And then I reclassed a few years later to Fort Observer with field artillery. So
my dad was an FO in Vietnam.
Oh wow!
Out of Fort Carson, Colorado, Division Artillery, but that's what he did.
Awesome.
Yeah, they sat on steel pots as they were up in the Hueys, looking at stuff. So not fun back in the day. So, but anyway, let's talk about you. You go through basic. What's your where do you go after that?
So I come back home. I tried to. Excuse me. Before I left AIT, we had a really cool.
AIT,
Advanced Individual Training. Just your military occupational school. We had a drill sergeant, Staff Sergeant Yarborough, and he was a ranger, and he had been to Desert
Rangers
Storm.
Lead the way.
Absolutely. And he was more. I mean, he was a hard ass, but he was a mentor to us. And I talked to him at length at the point, that we, after graduation, where they weren't giving you a hard time, and he. I told him, I'm like, I really want to go. I really want to go active duty. What do I need to do? And he gave me some advice. And when I got home, I pushed really hard. But at that time, with the reduction in force they were doing, the Guard had to have, they had to have a manning a certain amount of strength in the Guard. Active duty had to have a certain amount of manpower, and it was just really hard at that time to transition, or they made the process hard. You had to get agreement from your company commander, and then it had to go on up the line, for them to approve to release you, because then now that shows their numbers on the books is down. So it was just kind of really a pain in the ass when I got back home, and I was going to college. I went to Harvard on the highway, Davis County Community College at that time, because I knew, I'd always had interest in wanting to be a cop. So I was starting to take courses in criminal justice.
But why? Why'd you always have an interest?
I don't really know. I really think it had to do with, with my dad. I grew up, my dad had guns. I grew up with, just being infatuated with hunting and shooting, and
Did he ever do any observances of Memorial Day, Veterans Day, get up in uniform, or do anything military related when you were growing up?
No, I got smacked in the back of the head one time for not standing up for the national anthem at a football game
There
by
you
my
go.
father. But yeah, so I mean, it was always, and I remember too, there was an instance, and I ended up working a case on the guy years later. When I was in high school, a dude that was, several years older than us. He ended up being part of the, being involved with the Outlaws Motorcycle Club, but he thought that I looked at him at a stoplight, and, we had to wind it down as men, a buddy of mine I played ball with. And, he runs at the stoplight. He jumps out of his car, runs over and punched me in the face. And I reached up and I grabbed him by the wrist, and I was trying to get Bobby to drive so we could drag him down the road, but there was a car in front of us. So he pulls loose, and now we're able to, pull away so I don't get punched anymore. And I remember We went because we were just a block over from school, pulled back in the parking lot at school, told the principal what happened. We called the sheriff's department. I'll never, ever forget it. And he's dead now, but he ended up being a decent guy. Um, he was a detective, and he happened to be close by when the call came out, and he shows up. And I told him who the guy was, and he knew him. And I'll never forget it because it left a lasting impression on me. He said, "Do you really want to go through with applying for a warrant on him, because it was a misdemeanor warrant, so I could have went to the magistrate's office?" He said, "Do you really want to go through that process and have to deal with him and his friends? Because that's what it's going to be." And in my mind at that point, everything that I thought about law enforcement was kind of poured down the drain, because I thought, you're a cop. You should want, on my behalf as a citizen, to go whip his ass and take him to jail. And when he said that, and I realized that the flippant response that I got from him, I'm like, that's nobody. We're here to protect people, or at least try our best to make them feel like we're doing everything that we can. And it really, really stuck with me. It really pissed me off. And so I kind of, in the back of my mind, kind of always thought that was something that I wanted to do, because it just, like I said, it just wasn't right. It wasn't the right response.
And how old were you at the time?
Oh God, I probably would have been 15, 16 years old. And,
wow.
And that guy was probably 20, 21.
So funny you should mention that, because when I was a high school senior, Chapman, Kansas, the Chapman Fighting Irish, and our rivals were the Abilene, Kansas Cowboys, home of Dwight Eisenhower. And I remember being in a quick stop or a stop and rob parking lot, wearing the leather jacket and stuff, and everybody's talking smack. But this kid out of nowhere just sucker punches me, hits me in the side of the face, cuts my inside of my cheek. I'm kind of bleeding. Well, one of the Abilene cops happened to be right there. Arrest him on the spot. And he kind of said, "Hey, we can do this." It was one of those things. I didn't know any better. It wasn't a gang related thing. It's like, yeah, I don't care. But it's so funny because the guy arrested him, Larry Cole, ended up going to the highway patrol. So years later, I'm on the highway after Salina PD. I'm on the highway patrol. Larry Cole is the safety sergeant. He's in my division. And we got to talking about that one night. I said, "I got to thank you, man, for saving my ass." He goes, "It wasn't so much saving your ass because Chapman had just beat Abilene, I guess, in a game." He says, "I just didn't really like that kid." That kind of put it in perspective. I wasn't doing this for you. I was doing this for me. Yeah. But it was so funny, though. I mean, it's funny how those, you run into people years later, but so you get that, but you're going through, like I said, what point, where are you at in your military? Do you go active duty, or what do you do?
No, I tried. I'd put in a request chit, and that's actually how I ended up going to Fort Observer School at Fort Bragg. I'd put in a couple request chits to go active duty, and they would set on them. Our command at the time would set on them. I wasn't getting, really any forward momentum with it whatsoever. I was working security in the evenings. Was going to college during the day, and I knew, like,
is this your first or second attempt at college?
Well, there were several attempts. First, third, at fourth. I mean, hell, it was, yeah. I liked it enough. I kept going back just, until I finally finished. But
you wore them down.
I wore them down. I beat them down. And at that particular time, the war obviously hadn't started. We were still having fun, because I would volunteer for advance party every time we'd go to the field, to go to Fort Bragg and hang out, and play Army. And at that time too, it was kind of like television. It was really lax. Me and some buddies would go down advance party. We'd take a grill and a steaks and a cooler full of beer, and we just have a big time. I mean, it was a lot of fun. But I was working security, and a guy I played football with, he called me one day and he said, "Hey, look," he said, "the sheriff's department's hiring." And he said, and at that time I was 20 years old. I wasn't even 21 yet. He said, "The sheriff's department's hiring." He said, they're hiring dudes right now. And he said, you need to apply if this is what you want to do. And I'm like, well, I've got a chit in, go active duty. That's kind of really what I want to do, but I kind of want to do this too. And then I thought about it for a day or two, and I thought, you know what, I'll apply, because, worst case scenario, they'll tell me no. And I sat down and put a resume together, which there really wasn't much to put on it. And I turned it in and started the process. Well, in the meantime, and Steve will remember this, Jim Johnson would have been the sheriff, and he had lost. He was still the sitting sheriff, but he had lost the primary, and the general election. So Gerald Heggie was the incoming sheriff, but he hadn't been sworn in yet. So I had to interview with him, and he was a Vietnam vet and a complete moron. But part of my interview process, my very first law enforcement job, was interviewing with him. He looked at my resume and he said, "Do you think you can whip my ass?" And I'm like, this is, what I thought was supposed to be a professional interview. And now the guy's asking me if I can whip his ass. And I said, well, I'm pretty sure I probably can. And he stood up and he said, "So you really think you can?" And I'm thinking, probably better chance than not. I mean, we can do it Australian style, go out back and figure it out. One or two of us is going to win. So he sat down and he sat back in the chair and he laughed and he said, well, can you do 50 push-ups? And I'm like, yeah, we can do this all day. And I had on a suit and tie. And he looked at me for a minute and he said, "Were you going to do them, or you're going to keep sitting in the chair?" So I take my jacket off, my tie, I drop down to 50 push-ups. I stand back up, and he looks at the guy beside him. He said, "If his background checks out, hire him. I want him to come to work." So I stood there he said, "Do you have any questions?"
That's my interview?
That's what I said. I'm like, "Is that my interview?" I said, "Do I need to do anything else?" And he's like, "No, we'll be in contact with you." So I left, and I'm like, this is the dumbest shit I've ever seen. And about a week or two goes by, and I knew they had called my references. And they called me. They said, we're going to offer you a job. Be here December the 5th. And we're going, everybody will be sworn in on that date. And, you'll kind of get your marching orders from there.
Now, you got to understand a little bit about this Sheriff Gerald Hagee. He thought he was a modern day Buford Pusser, who was the famous sheriff from Tennessee. I mean, so much so that he carried a wooden stick, like Buford did up in Tennessee. His police car as the sheriff was I think it was a Chevy Capri, wasn't it?
It was an Impala. It was an Impala when they came out with them again.
And didn't he have that built by the Richard Childress racing team? Richard
Childress Racing, Dale Earnhart's team. Yeah, they built a motor in it for him.
And he had it painted complete black, and then he had this white spider web design on it. And over the door, you know how race car drivers put their name on there, and they have to climb through the window? Sheriff put his name and Sheriff up there. I mean, this guy was eat up with it.
Yes, he was. He was eat up with it. He painted the walls of the jail pink with blue teddy bears on it with a tear coming out of their eye.
Yeah. He was something that was, I think I might have told Morgan this story real quick. Yeah. And you probably don't know it, Kevin, but when I was with DEA there in Greensboro, I was out on the interstate one day I was probably heading down to Salisbury, and I got this call, didn't recognize on the cell phone. And so I called him back, and it was a congressional staffer out of one of the North Carolina senator's offices in D.C. And he's Agent Murphy? And I said, yeah. And he said, this is so-and-so. And he said, I got a question for you. The sheriff in Davidson County has requested you come down and assist his agency, and you've refused to do so. You got any explanation for that? I said, the explanation I got is this is the improper way for you to call me. There's protocols in place. There's proper chains of command and channels. I have no idea who you are. You need to go through the proper chain, and we'll talk later. And I hung up on him. Well, it wasn't 2 days. I'm in the boss's office. Hey, did you hang up on a guy from Washington? Yeah. But after I explained myself. Anyway, what that led into is that was my introduction, because I was ordered to go down and meet the guys at Davidson County. And what I found was, a group of fantastic investigators that, got to be really close friends. The sheriff, you had to kind of keep him at arm's length.
You had to.
I mean, I remember when they were running he was a Republican, right?
Mm-hmm, he was.
And so when the Democrats were holding their fundraisers at the local country club, the sheriff would set up DUI checkpoints on both sides of the exit.
He did.
From the
I worked
club.
One of them. At Bob Timberlake, the artist, he had a fundraiser, and I worked at and when I was in field training, and one of the state legislators come through, and I asked to see his driver's license, and he looked up at me and he said, I heard the son of a bitch was going to do it, but I didn't think he had the balls. And I said, yes, sir, he does. You have a nice day.
Hey, Murph, is this the same guy who had a C's truck tractor semi-trailer
That's
and
the
wanted to
one.
run an operation?
Hey, Kevin, I went down there. I don't know if you were there or not, Kevin, but I went down there and I was meeting with who was it a captain or lieutenant in charge of the Vice and Narcotics?
Oh, it would have been Brad Glisson.
Yeah, Brad.
Yep, Brad.
Yeah, so I'm standing there and the sheriff comes in talking to the guys. He's like, Murph, how you doing? And I'm like, hey, Sheriff, how you doing? He said, listen, Murph, I got a plan. This is going to require your input here. I'm going to need you to do some things for us. He said, we just got this tractor trailer out of seizure and it's mine now. So what I'm going to do is Brad, some of the guys, there's this truck stop just outside of El Paso on the interstate. We're going to set the truck down there with my guys and we're going to put the word out. Hey, we're willing to transport anything, anywhere, anytime for the right amount of money. And so when they get approached to move these loads of dope into the United States, I'm going to call you and I need you to set everything up. And I'm looking at him like, when did you become the sheriff of the United States? You know, you're the sheriff of Davidson County. And as we're having this conversation, Brad's standing behind him the whole time, just shaking his head no. He's like, don't listen to him. And finally the sheriff, I said, Sheriff, sounds like an idea. And he walked away and Brad came over and he's like, I'm sorry, Murph. That's all bullshit. We know we can't do that.
Oh, those are
This
some
guy,
good
he was
times.
one of a kind, wasn't he?
Absolutely.
So now, as the old saying went, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. We have with you instead December 5th, a date which will live in infamy because this is the day Kevin Black, also known as Kevin Jackson, the Motown performer, decides to enter into law enforcement. So how does that go, man? I mean, do you have to do push-ups on your first day again? What?
No, it was kind of a, it was a transition period. So it was a giant clusterfuck. There was, you had outgoing personnel, you had incoming personnel, you had, everybody trying to, run around to get resworn. It was pretty, pretty long day. Everybody trying to find out where they kind of fit. And I was told to, they were going to find me a BLET, a rookie school date. But in the meantime, they were going to just have me do, kind of whatever needed to be done around the agency. So
how big was the agency when you got on? You remember how many sworn, how many total employees?
It probably would have been over 100, total at that time. And now it's probably, God, I guess it's 250 now, maybe. So I guess I drew the short straw and they needed somebody to fill in at the animal control shelter, taking money, doing things like that. So that was my first job. And Brad Glisson, Steve, Brad was part of what they considered the old regime. So they had busted Brad down from captain and put him down there. So Brad would come pick me up and show me the county. And that's how Brad and I, you got to be friends. And I did that. It probably just maybe 3 or 4 weeks till they hired somebody to, a civilian to do that job. And they put me working in the detention center as a detention officer. And that was a lot of fun. That's when I really kind of learned how to deal with people. I had 2 people on my squad that were Desert Storm vets, just really, really good seasoned guys. And they taught me how to deal with people. You'd work intake on a Friday or Saturday night and, the highway patrol would be bringing drunks in, domestics would come in. I mean, it was just...
If you wanted to see everything you could possibly deal with out on the street, it's going to pass through the portals of that jail, usually within 24 to 48 hours.
I have the utmost respect for anybody that can work on that side of the house as a career. I mean, they've got it a lot worse than the rest of us do.
Not something I ever wanted to do.
Mm-mm. But at the time, and I told somebody this the other day. At the time, it was great because I didn't know anything else. And I thought it was really the cat's ass. That was it was just a good time. I learned a lot. You had true trustees at that point because I remember there was a couple guys that would they would go to jail just to stay off the streets, and you could trust them. You could wake them up in the middle of the night and they would go cook you something to eat because you couldn't leave, but you didn't have to worry about them spitting in your food or doing something else to it. And it was just a different point in time, I guess.
Yeah, it was.
Man, was that so? Yeah, because I remember first starting off as a Ute, as a rookie cop, the Salina Police Department, Saline County Jail, same building, and they used to have trustees. They allow these guys to go out and clean the cars and do stuff. And I was going, you really let those folks out? He goes, to your point, some of these folks, it's like the only place where they ever get a roof over their head and 3 hots and a cot is jail. Otherwise, they're out on the streets sofa surfing or begging for handouts. So some of these guys are actually more comfortable inside jail.
Oh, yeah. And, at the end of the day, especially after 27, almost 28 years, not everybody in jail is a bad person. People make mistakes in life. I've made a blue million of them, and I was just lucky that, I had a lot more opportunities than a lot of people did and learned from those mistakes. But not everybody in jail is bad. Not every, it took me a while to realize that, after being when I was a rookie, but now hindsight's 2020. There's some decent people there just made mistakes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But for the grace of God, go I.
Yeah.
And most cops are one paycheck away from being a stupid idiot anyway. So, yeah. So let's talk about that. So as you progressed through that, when did you finally get the opportunity to hit the road? What changed? How long were you doing the ACO and the jail stuff before you actually got to go hit the road?
So I was hired in December, and I think we started the academy in. I think it was March or April of 1995, and that's when I almost got fired the first time. Would have been during the police academy.
Okay, I got to start a tally between going to college and getting fired. Okay, what led to this almost getting fired?
So that particular class was all personnel from different agencies that were already hired. They just had to go through the state certification course. We had several from High Point Police Department. There was 3 or 4 of us from Davidson County, and then they had a couple people, I guess, as filler. There was one guy that he liked it so much he'd done it 3 times, but couldn't quite master the state exam. But so it was one Friday early on in the academy, and one of the instructors called in sick. So the school decided, for whatever reason, they were going to have some civilian lady come over and talk about resume preparation and applying for a job. Well, all of us, like I said, with the exception of 3 or 4, were hired. And Steve will remember my buddy Todd Cates. We're still lifelong friends to this day. Todd had done his internship with ATF while he was in college. And so we're mock interviewing each other. We're not paying attention, just goofing off. And one of the questions Todd asked me during the interview was, have you ever had sex with a chicken? And
because that's on every entrance exam.
So I start making chicken noises. Well, we were a little bit louder than we probably should have been. And the lady heard it and took offense to it, but she didn't say anything. So that Monday morning, we're back in the academy and back in class, and I don't even remember what the topic was, but I saw the sheriff walk by the door, and then I saw one of the majors right behind him, and I'm like, that's kind of odd. And a couple seconds later, the guy over the BLET program opens the door, and the sheriff, the major, sticks his head inside the door and points 2 fingers, one at me and one at Todd, because we sat side by side. And he says, "You two, come here." And I'm like, God, what is this about? So we go into a side office.
Wait a minute. You had no clue because you were asking if you ever had sex with a chicken and doing that was about that?
Well, I didn't know she was that thin-skinned that it would have offended her, but obviously it did. And so we go into this office, and the sheriff sat behind one of the instructor's desk, and he shuts the door and he said, "You 2 assholes think this is a game?" And Todd or I one said, "What are you talking about, sir?" He said, "Your conduct on Friday in class." And we're like, what specifically do you mean? Because I'll never be a witness against me. So I need to know what you know before you know what I know, or what part I'm going to tell you.
And you've already learned from the military, it's all bullshit. Don't admit to anything.
You're going to waterboard me or something, but I'm not,
I'm not giving it up, pal.
And then he says, the comments you 2 thought were funny during the mock interviews you were doing on Friday. And I said, well, Sheriff, it was really a waste of time. Everybody in the class is already hired. We were just kind of goofing off to ourselves. Obviously, someone else heard it that took offense to it. And, he said, I want to know exactly what was said. And Todd, to his credit, looks at him and he says, well, I asked Kevin if he ever fucked a chicken. And the sheriff kind of sat back. He sat back and the sheriff looked at me and he said, and what did you have to say? And I said, "Bark, bark, bark, bark." And the major busts out laughing, and the sheriff looks down and he's trying not to crack a smile. And he looks back up and he said, you two assholes go back to class, and if I hear your name again before you graduate, I'll fire both of you. We're like, roger that, sir. So out the door we went.
I mean, how could you keep a straight face?
He pulled it off. He pulled it off pretty good.
And did they ever hear your name again during the academy?
Not mine. No, sir. Mine or Todd's, either one. We kept it together and graduated.
Oh man!
Well, so was that a truthful answer, though?
That was absolutely a truthful answer, because that was the answer I gave when the question was asked.
No, I meant to the real question. You ever had sex with a chicken?
Yeah, that was a truthful answer. That was absolutely not. I've not ever done that or wanted to.
Or wouldn't even know how.
I mean, I'm sure there's a way, but
where do I start? Okay. Wait, one of those scrambled eggs looks like your father. And you were the lucky one. I can't believe it. So you get out of the academy. So kind of talk about your progression, because eventually you end up working a lot of narcotics. So when does that bug hit you? You start working the road first, right?
Yeah. They put me. I never ever had any desire whatsoever to work drugs at that particular time in life. My career goal was to, I wanted to be a deputy U.S. Marshal, because I had a friend that worked for the VA that knew the deputy marshal in Winston at the time, and he'd introduced me to him, and that was kind of in the back of my mind. But I never wanted to work drugs. Never really wanted to work detective division. I really, thought that and it is the meat and potatoes of every law enforcement state or local law enforcement agency, is patrol. And, I thought I'll do this and I'll do the best job I can do. I'll finish college and, maybe one day before I retire, I'll be a captain, over, patrol division. So at that particular time in life, they put me on what was called S Squad, which we worked from 1400 to 02 was our rotation. And it was basically to cover the peak crime hours. Got through field training. It was a good time, had good FTOs. But I noticed that because I was, really wanted to work, I always felt like if I'm going to be here for 12 hours, I've got ADD horribly. I'm going to stay busy because, I just don't want to sit around and be bored. So I was constantly getting into stuff. I mean, just constantly. And in doing so, stopping cars, trying to serve warrants, you're going to come across drugs. Not a whole lot of guns at that time like it is today. I mean, there was some, but I was just really, really, I guess I had a horseshoe up my butt because it kind of came easy. So I'd kind of made a name for myself, and in the meantime, I got on SWAT, got in trouble again for not doing a felony vehicle stop on a carjacking suspect.
No, you got to tell this story because you got fired on this one, didn't you?
No, that was later on down the road. No, that was later down the road.
Oh, well,
yeah.
Okay.
I called on the carpet for that.
All right, well, okay. Let's talk about that. So, this is not a training exercise. This is the real deal, right? Felony car stop.
Oh yeah, this is yeah. Carjacking just occurred, and I've got he was a reserve officer at the time. He's dead now, Ronnie Foster. Ronnie was in the passenger seat. He liked to ride with me, and Ronnie was a good guy. Later got cancer and died, but we're heading inbound to Lexington, and they give out this bolo. Be on the lookout for I think it was a Ford Taurus at that time, occupied possibly by three black males just involved in a carjacking in the city of Lexington. And literally about the last word that come out of the dispatcher's mouth, I look over in the northbound lane, of travel. And I'm like, son of a bitch, there's a gray Ford Taurus. So we bust the median, hit the blue light zone. Car runs for a little bit. Finally, the guy pulls over. And I was so excited with the fact that this was possibly somebody that had just, carjacked someone, and I was, going to be able to, get the collar for it. Ronnie and I both bail out of the car and run up, with guns drawn. And sure enough, there was 3 guys in there, and they had a pistol laying in the floorboard, and we arrested them. And the next morning, the major calls me in, and he said, that was a great job you did. He said, but I don't see anything in your report about a felony vehicle stop. He said, do you remember those, since you just graduated several months ago from rookie school? I'm like, oh yeah, I remember how to do them. And he said, well, why didn't you do them? He said, and I said, well, I forgot about it that night, but I do remember how to do them. So then he, explained, took the time to explain to me how that was, a stupid decision. I, could have been hurt or killed. And, so it was a learning experience.
It is. But that's especially as a rookie, that's your inclination, is to get up there and get hands on before they have a chance to run.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the lessons I had to learn too. It's just when you're rookie, you want to burn a blue streak through everything.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, back when I started, Murph started before me. Murph still was on horses. They would go to call boxes, and do stuff like that. So
yeah, but we look good.
You look good in those stirrups. But, I just remember it's like, you want to make arrests, you want to do stuff like that. And I actually had a mentor, officer, somebody who really liked me. Actually, we both came from the same hometown. He sat me down one time. This is when I first learned the story. Have you ever heard the story about the young bull and the old bull?
Yes, on top of the hill. Yep.
Yeah. Have you heard this one, Murph?
I've heard a lot of bullshit, but I'm not sure I've heard this story.
So you got a young bull and an old bull sitting on top of the hill, and there's a herd of cattle down there, and the young bull says, let's run down and screw one of them cows. And the old bull says, let's walk down and screw them all. And so that's when I first got it. It's like, if you just slow down a little, Skippy, and not overdrive your headlights, you're going to get into a whole lot more stuff. But when you go so fast, you're going to miss, to your point, danger signals. You run up there. You've got pistols. Yeah. So, Gary, see, there's this. I just told you a story you didn't know, Murph. I thought as an old timer like you collected these stories, sitting in a cave, writing stuff on the walls, for posterity.
I've probably forgotten more than you'll ever know, Morgan.
How do you know? If you forgot it. Anyway, back to our regularly scheduled podcast. So, Kevin, that was the first of many instances to where you were going to have violations of department policy.
Oh yeah. That was the first. That was the first of many. So I guess in the meantime, I'd kind of made a name for myself. As being a hardworking officer or a dumbass, or probably a combination of the two. And at that time, they had a thing that was called the TAC team, and it was basically a uniform arm of the narcotics division, and we would do everything from drug interdiction to assist on stuff that the drug guys, the plainclothes guys, were doing. And I guess that was probably around the time that I would have met Steve, and so I started doing that. I think about everybody at that time was on SRT, and that would have been the SWAT team for the sheriff's office. That would have been along the time that about 1996 that we had an officer shot on duty, and that's kind of when it kind of really brought everything to somewhat to light that this was it's not all fun and games. It's a serious business.
So talk about that shooting. Were you working that day or off?
Yeah, we just actually we were in Thomasville. Bill Kepley was the officer that was shot. They had went to some kind of domestic, and I don't even remember the suspect's name. He had actually went next door, and he had stabbed an elderly lady. I don't know why. Then he went back to his parents' house, and when the two officers get there, he comes down the hallway with a gun, and of course they unasked the porch to get away from him and get behind cover, and he was able to actually shoot Bill Kepley in the, I can't remember if it was the femur or the hip, but it put Bill down to where he couldn't roll over.
Couldn't move.
Yeah, he couldn't move.
Yeah.
And we had just hit a house in Thomasville with our group, and when the call came out, shots fired, officer down, and of course we
Was that your first officer down call?
That would have been, yeah, that would have been my first one.
So, we talked about the emotions like when you met your family for the first time, your biological mom and dad. Now that you're kind of getting out of that rookie stage, you're doing that. How did this affect you the first time you got a call like that where it's one of your own? I mean, how did that change your perception, your mindset about not just that incident, but going forward?
And the initial, because we had an officer killed a couple years after that. The initial thing in my mind, I remember thinking, because I left my car with my SWAT gear in it at the house that we just raided, because it was boxed in by some other officers. And I jumped in a car with a guy named, and Steve remember, Frankie Young. He was a K-9 officer. And I think it was Scott Craven, who's chief deputy now, was in the passenger seat. And I sat on the center armrest in the car and had to grab onto the K-9 kennel to hold on, because, of course, we're going Mach 4 to get there. And so there's three of us in the car. My SWAT gear's back at the house that we just raided, because I couldn't get it out from all the other cars that were in the way. And I don't know why that was a good idea, not to take my own ride down there. But all I could think about en route to the call was somebody did something to one of ours, and it's payback time. We can't get down there quick enough, to take care of business. And at that time, there was no real sense of, well, oh shit, he's done shot one officer. If you shot one, you might as well try to shoot 3 or 4 more. And what I didn't know at the time, it transpired, is as other officers got there, he actually shot into another officer's car. So we get there, and they're starting to deploy SWAT guys. We're starting to come down and kind of take over the perimeter, or augment the perimeter, till they can decide, what's going on. And
hey, real quick, and tell everybody about, at this point, you're still in uniform, right? Assisting the TAC team, so you're in uniform?
Still in uniform. So
now, are you wearing Kevlar then?
I had on a regular duty vest, just a regular undervest. And all I could think of was, well, I've got shiny shit on me. I've got my badge, I've got my name tag, I've got my, collar insignias. So I took all of that off, and I borrowed a shotgun from one of the patrol officers that was there, and then went down and took up part of the perimeter duties at the scene. And Bill was evacuated. They've got him en route to the hospital. We know he's moved. We've got snipers across the road. We've got the back of the house covered. And negotiations start. And the car that Steve was talking about comes in play. The guy had his mother and father hostage in the house. And he, through negotiations, decided that he wanted to see what everybody around this area called was the spider car. And that was the car that the sheriff drove. So the sheriff, they put out on the radio, they're like, the sheriff's going to pull down. He's going to pull down in front of the house, top of the driveway, so the guy can see the car. They're trying to pacify him to see if, he'll release his parents. And I can't remember if it was before or after. I think it was prior to him agreeing to come down. He let his mom and dad go. And Gerald Heggie pulls up in the driveway. And what was funny is a couple of officers that were SWAT guys that were at the back of the house with me. Somebody said, I hope they shoot that son of a bitch when he pulls in the driveway, because he was such a pain in the ass to work for. And of course, we all got a chuckle out of that. And we moved around to the corner of the house, because they were going to try to get him out on the porch. And either the sniper would be able to take a shot if he was still armed, or, we would be able to engage him at the corner of the residence. So the sheriff pulls up top of the driveway, throws the car door open, and the guy's like, well, I want to hear you rev up the engine. So he revs up the engine. They play that little game back and forth. And then pretty quickly you could realize that the negotiations were not going to go anywhere. And he tells the sheriff, the sheriff says, you need to come on out and give up. And bad guy says, well, I got enough food and water in here to last a week. And then the sheriff's reply was, well, that's good, but you don't have but about an hour to eat and drink it on. We're coming in to get you. And he gets in the car and takes off up the driveway. And I remember turning to one of the guys beside him, and I said, what's this we shit? Damn good and well he's not coming back down here. He said, no, that's us. That's us he's
You got a
talking about.
turd in your pocket there,
Yeah.
son? Yeah, what's this wee
Yeah.
stuff? Well, the other thing, too, is you never want to telegraph. It's like, okay, we're going to come in an hour. Okay.
Yep, that's what he told him. And
Well, the other thing, too, the other rule in negotiations, too, is you don't give up something unless you get something in return. Yeah, I'll rev up the engine, but why don't you at least let one of them go?
Yep.
You know? You want something, you want the sheriff to show up? Good faith. You do something first.
Absolutely.
But anyway, so continue on. How's this situation unfold and resolve?
So the parents are let out of the house, and he comes on the back. The bad guy comes on the back porch, and he knew we were.
Why did they let the parents go?
I don't know. I to this day, I don't know why he let him go. Honestly, I'm surprised he didn't kill him. I think that's probably what he wanted to do. I just don't think he could bring himself to do it. And we transitioned from the front corner of the house, around to the back. And he comes out on the back porch, and he knew where we were at, but he couldn't see us because it was dark, and we'd put the street light out, but we could see him from the porch light. And he cranks off a couple rounds just randomly out across the backyard, where of course everybody tries to get as low to the ground as they can get at that point. And I remember, it was Brad Gliss and myself, and I think it was Jody Shove. I remember coming back up and taking a knee and bringing the shotgun up and leveling it out. And it was like, well, as you guys know, everything was in slow motion. He's raising the gun up, but instead of raising it up to point, he's raising the barrel up and sticks it to his temple and pulls the trigger and blows his brains out.
What kind of weapon did he have? Do you remember?
Had 1911, yeah. Shot one through one temple right out the other because, of course, then we're moving forward to clear the rest of the residence. And he's laying there, sucking his last breath. He's dead, but his body's dead, but I don't think his brain has registered everything yet. So he's still trying to gasp for air. And then, then he was out.
Dang.
Kind of, I mean, that's a whole lot of firsts for you. I mean, like, you've got an armed standoff, you've got, an officer down, you've got suspect. Never had that happen where the suspect commits suicide right in front of you. We've had it happen inside the house, away from, or you find them a couple days later, and they've killed themselves. So, but the officer who was shot, how did he do?
Ended up doing well. Matter of fact, I saw him. I guess it was last month. He's getting close to the end. I think he still has issues. Mobility wise. It's not. He'll never be 100%. But at that time, that's when I found out how screwed up everything was. I had the emotions of, went to the hospital that night like everybody did, got home, sat down, and that's when it kind of hit me. This is not a game. My father tried to tell me that, before I got on the department. This is real. There's really bad people in the world, and they do bad shit to each other, and you need to be cognizant of that. And up to that point, I mean, I might as well had a cape on and an S on my chest. I mean, I just didn't think anything could happen to any of us. And but I remember the initial emotion of being upset because a friend was shot and injured, and the reality of this is real. But then the secondary emotion was I wouldn't want to do anything else. This is what I want to do. This is what I want to do in my life.
Hey players, that is the end of part 1. Part 2 comes out, as always, on Tuesday. In the meantime, go check us out at Game of Crimes on Twitter, at Game of Crimes Podcast on Facebook and the Instagram. Also, go check out our website, gameofcrimespodcast.com. We've got a lot more information there, including our book list. Any book written by our guests will be listed there. In the meantime, go check us out also, patreon.com/Game of Crimes. It's where we put a lot more content you won't hear on our regular podcast. We go into a lot more topics, and folks, it is a lot of fun. So go check us out, patreon.com/Game of Crimes. In the meantime, everybody stay safe. We'll see you tomorrow for part 2.